Hello everybody, today Pops is going to read the story called The Inch Prince.
Inch Prince. Long ago in a remote village in China, there lived an old couple named Mr. and Mrs. Ping. Their home was a tiny house at the foot of a mountain beside a rushing river. The Pings loved it. Every day Mr. Ping weeded the beans and the rest of the plants in their vegetable plot. Meanwhile Mrs. Ping fed the chickens and all the other animals. As dusk fell, the couple watered the sweet-smelling flowers in their beautiful garden. The Pings had almost everything they could want. Well, almost. "I wish we had some children," sighed Mr. Ping. Mrs. Ping even sadly one evening. "So do I," said Mr. Ping, "but only a tiny child will fit into our tiny house. We hardly have room for a cat." "Small things can be special too," said his wife. "Maybe," said Mr. Ping. "But if there'd need to be the smallest child in the world to fit in here." "I wouldn't care if they were just 1 inch tall," said Mrs. Ping. At that very moment a fairy happened to fly past. She overheard what Mr. and Mrs. Ping were saying. She noticed their healthy plump vegetables growing away in the sun, not to mention their contented animals and their enormous blossoming flowers. "These two are obviously very good at looking after everything around them," thought the fairy. "They deserve to be looked after too." With that, she hovered over the Ping's tiny house, waved her wand, and whispered some magic words. "Jumping beans and flying fish, give these folks their dearest wish." Soon after, Mr. and Mrs. Ping became proud parents of a teeny weeny boy. In fact, he was so teeny, he was just 1 inch tall. "Well, we wanted a small child. Isn't he sweet?" "Let's name him Issen Boshi," said Mrs. Ping. "That means 1 inch boy." "And we could call him Issy for short," said her husband. Very short," he added with a smile. Time passed quickly for the Pings and their new son. Every year their vegetables grew more plump and their animals grew fatter and their flowers grew so tall they almost fell over. But Issy never grew any higher than 1 inch tall. Issy was so tiny, the Pings had to find him new uses for everyday objects. A bottle top from Mrs. Ping's homemade rice wine became a bathtub. One of the shoelaces from Mrs. Ping's pink walking boots turned into a scarf. A dried pea made a great ball. Mrs. Ping's button collection was put to good use as dinner plates. And every night, Issy curled up to sleep in a little matchbox bed. When he was 18 years old, it was time for Issy to leave home. "I'll get a job in the city," he announced confidently. His parents gave him 3 presents for the journey. He had a rice bowl for a boat, 2 wooden chopsticks, which made a fine pair of oars, and a sword to defend himself. Actually, Mrs. Ping's sharpest needle. Issy set off on his long journey down the river between tall mountains, past sleepy villages, around wild woods, through walled market towns, until he reached the bustling big city. Issy clambered ashore and scuttled along the crowded streets. "I'll ask the Emperor for a job," he thought, "if I don't get squashed first." After dodging hundreds of stomping feet, Issy finally reached the Emperor's enormous palace. He strode up to the guards on the gate. Issy puffed out his chest. "I'd like a job," he declared, politely but firmly. The guards looked down and laughed. "You're teeny," said one with a chuckle. "What could a pipsqueak do like you?" "I can run past you," said Issy. He jumped over the guard's foot and darted into the palace before anybody could stop him. In the courtyard, a maid was busy washing royal clothes. "I'd like a job," said Issy. "Hee, you're weeny," chuckled the maid. "What can you do?" "I can run past you for a start," Issy replied. He jumped over the maid's soap and sprinted to the palace kitchen. The cook was preparing a royal dinner. "I'd like a job," said Issy. "Ha!" snorted the cook as he stirred a pot of squelchy cabbage. "You're tiny, what you can do? What can you do?" "I can run past you for a start," answered Issy with a grin. He swerved around the cook's oven and dashed into the next room. Issy gasped. He arrived in the throne room. He bowed respectfully to the Emperor and the Princess. "I'd like a job," said Issy. "Well, what could you do?" said the Emperor. "He's teeny weeny, Daddy," said the Princess Chi-Chi. "What can he do?" "Well, I ran past your guard, your maid and your cook to get here," said Issy. "They couldn't stop me." The Emperor thought for a moment. "You can look after Princess Chi-Chi," he said. "She needs a bodyguard." "But Daddy," moaned the Princess, "how can he defend me? He's only 1 inch tall." "Small things can be special too," said the Emperor. "You're hired." "Thank you, Your Majesty," said Issy. From then on, Issy never left the Princess's side. He was there in the morning, in the afternoon, and he was there all night as well. One day the Princess left for the palace to visit her aunt, far beyond the city. As usual, Issy was right by her side. After many miles, they came to a dark forest. "I'm scared," said Princess Chi-Chi. "I'll look after you," said Issy. "What could you do?" quivered the Princess. Then a terrifying roar echoed around the wood. "Rah!" A giant ogre crashed through the trees and reached out to grab the Princess. "Put her down," shouted Issy, or you'll do what?" With that, the ogre scooped up Issy. I love bite-sized snacks," he said, and popped Issy in his mouth. Issy thought quickly. He took out the needle sword and pricked the ogre's tongue. The ogre let out an ear-splitting "Ow!" The ogre spat out Issy and ran off into the woods. "That'll teach him," cried the tiny bodyguard. "Thank you, Issy," said the Princess. "You saved my life." "Hey, look," said Issy. The ogre left his hammer behind. "And the legend says that an ogre's hammer is magic," said the Princess excitedly. She tried to pick up the massive tool, but it was far too heavy. "I wish you were bigger, Issy," she puffed. "Then maybe you could lift it." Instantly a cloud of magical stars shot out of the hammer and swept around Issy. "What's going on?" he cried. Issy felt something strange happening. His arms seemed to be getting longer, and his legs, in fact, his whole body was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Seconds later he found himself standing shoulder to shoulder with the Princess for the first time. "I'm as tall as you," cried Issy. The hammer must have granted your wish. The Princess fell in love with Issy, but not because he was tall, but because she loved him, because he was brave. It wasn't long before they were married and lived in a house next to the palace. The house was small, but Prince Issy and Princess Chi-Chi were happy. They both know that small things can be special too. That's it. Thank you, folks. Good night.
Good night.